Hi, Sean Durham here again with Fine Art Street Photography. Hope you're having a lovely time. Anyway, the other day I went out and I took photos in a park here in Berlin because I kept thinking about it. And I kept thinking, okay, it's winter, it's cold, it's breezy, there's no leaves on the tree. But I went to a park called Gleisdreieck. Yeah, it's a German word, and of course it's all in one, but it's 3 words which mean really triangular railway track corner. Why it's called that is obvious when you're there, because it's actually an old industrial station, shunting yard, and where goods would be brought in. So there's an awful lot of industrial stuff there that is really old and also still in use. But it's an interesting place to walk around. And, you know, as photographers, when we're faced with something a little bit more new, I don't do that all the time, but really heavy industrial sort of girders and steel and old concrete and things, it became quite interesting. And so I was looking at compositions and then looking at sort of textures. But what occurred to me is that, you know, in the wintertime, taking photos can sometimes be quite challenging because of the flatness of light. But it did make me think about, okay, so what can I do? Surely in wintertime, flat light, you can do something. And I started looking at the various structures and noticed that the cold light, and it was a overcast day, so there's white cloud in the sky, but quite a lot of reflection going on, very open space. And it gave me the opportunity to focus more on textures and lines and shadows that led into a little bit of colour in the texture. And it reminded me of the idea of how mindful we should be when we are taking photographs and take our time to study things around us. And so mindfulness in photography, I find that it's very important that, you know, I go out, I have hopes in my heart that I'm going to see something great. I'm walking around the city quite often in the middle of it, but this time I went to the park and I thought I'd find something. And on the way there, I'm getting all sort of, you know, I build up ideas inside of my mind and therefore expectations and therefore hopes. And it's quite often that you can arrive in a place and suddenly discover it's totally different to what I thought it would be. And it makes for the emotion of disappointment to rise up, and you stand there thinking, oh God, it's freezing cold, because it was cold. My fingers were icy cold, and it's the sort of weather that makes you want to go back home. And so I was thinking a lot about the idea of how does mindfulness apply to photography? How can we use it, and why should we? I do think it's a very important thing for photographers to practice mindfulness, because it's one of the things about it. I definitely say it's a very healthy practice, especially when you accept that, you know, being authentic about your photography is a very healthy practice. And therefore mindfulness is being sort of simply not projecting ideas onto what you see, but rather use the camera to capture ideas that you notice. And mindfulness is about noticing things, but in a very I wouldn't say minute way, but rather just become more aware. We live in a very fast world. We're often taught to be fast and do things quickly, like go to the park very rapidly. I'd walk down the road, I'd get on a train. It's as I was looking at this wooden fence that I really thought about the texture on it is wonderful, and the colours are very strong and deep, and the wood may have been a little bit wet. I think in the summertime it would have been quite pale. But it made it very interesting and it grabbed my attention. This is what mindfulness is. And we can do it intentionally, but in a very subtle way. Mindfulness can't be forced, but when we're out there taking photos, I do think if you're taking great photos, if you're out there and you're in your game, what we're really talking about is that you are already developing a sense of, or a practice of mindfulness, which is, is what photography does for us. It helps us, takes us away from all the dross of life, all the bad things of life, and we get out there and we know instinctively that I better concentrate on what I'm doing here. Mindfulness leads to concentration. Mindfulness is something that would actually help us to absorb ourselves in what we're looking at visually, and we become part of it, but we don't question it and judge it. As soon as we do that, we connect it with things outside of the object. And so if I'm looking at a landscape in a park, which is quite a big and varied park and very interesting, and so there were sort of flat green spaces, there was a church in the distance, there was people walking around, but it was freezing cold, and that freezing coldness can send me home. But as soon as I begin to become engaged with an idea, and because I'm a photographer, I just think, I don't care. My hands are freezing and they're getting even colder. My feet are cold. And the thing is that I've just seen something and my mind then becomes absorbed by it. And it's more important than anything else. I don't know how to describe it. You know, photography has a very deep meaning for me. Visual representation of the world means something to me. And I do think that's because I practice mindfulness and have done since I was a teenager. Instagram, very interesting when you can look at other photographers' work. I always ask myself, what can I do with it? You know, unless I come across a photographer, and I'm sure somebody out there produces great shots and it's well worth looking at, and it helps me to think more deeply about my own photography. That photography is really a wonderful thing. It's amazing that we have this machine that we can use to capture these small moments in life. So going out there into the park was a good experience. I didn't know what to expect, but I did get there feeling a bit rushed. I was, you know, trying to get down there once again, going out a bit late in the day, but the light wasn't bad at all for the winter. And I just really had about 25-30 minutes before the sun would go down, and I did my best. But also I did notice this thing about how the textures and lines and perspectives grabbed my attention, the colour, and it surprised me and it made me calm down. And it's only when you begin to calm down can you get anywhere close to mindfulness. So at the end of the day, mindfulness is about being able to take photos without making great judgments of what you're looking at, but allow the mind to order what you're looking at through engaging with it mentally, and mentally in a visual way. I'm quite sure that most people who are listening to this, the reason that they're interested in photography is because they think visually. So observe the scene without making judgments, soak up the colour, the line, the perspective and the textures. When you do this, leading lines and perspectives, they will actually become much more prominent in your mind, and you will be able to see a composition and therefore the frame of the photo a lot more quickly and a lot more easily, and you'll know that that's the shot. Mindfulness. It's just a little talk about how mindfulness is a practice. I'm somebody who thinks that photography is a wonderful thing. Nevertheless, there we have it, a little bit about mindfulness. I'm Sean Durham in Berlin. It's still winter, but I'm really hoping these months pass quickly, so we head into, you know, beginning of March in 6 weeks or so. And we might see some more sunshine and warmer days. Anyway, have a lovely weekend. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Oh yeah, if you want to subscribe to the channel, please do so, because it helps me very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.